Om Shatagunam Vidyan Mananam Mananadapi Nididhyasam Lakshagunam Anantam Nirvikalpakam Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Hearing about Brahman is good. Taking teachings on Brahman is better. Better still is meditating directly upon Brahman. But best of all is that meditation in which all doubt about the nature of reality dies away forever. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Glad indeed to see everyone gathered here today for our weekend satsang. Mentioned last week how weeks are just ticking by. We seem to see each other regularly because time flies by so fast. Months may be a little slower, years slower yet, but days and weeks flowing by in that river of time that Lord Buddha talked about, that we must try and extricate ourselves from and witness from a distance, and then learn how to participate in it without getting swept away by it in everyday activities in the face of all the changing phenomena of this universe. Because that one Brahman alone is real, all else is unreal. Or if you want to put it in a more captivating way, that one Brahman being seen in everything, known as everything a manifestation of it, then there is only Brahman, and you don't even have to say the world is unreal. It's just that beings attached to the wrong side of that equation find themselves into trouble and confusion, misdirection, and into this thing we call rebirth and ignorance and the suffering that ensues from it. So if the seers could come to this earth or look at us from their detached witness position, it would all be a different matter, wouldn't it? They'd see we were fine and they'd leave us to our own devices, balanced, mentally, physically healthy, with our prana flowing, with our minds thinking in high ways, and our consciousness elevated. Then they could merely retire from the scene and have faith that we would follow the road back to the source. And as we do, always be in awareness that path and goal and traveler are all one thing. And that when you do sojourn in the worlds of name and form, it's rather just a dream. And sometimes they will check in on our dreams, individual, collective. Collective dream is a massive mental projection, not just with 7 billion people on Earth, but with all the souls that are in our subtler consciousness, in the subtle mind, or in the sukshma sharira, all the lokas that are there with the beings, they themselves checking in on us too in our dreams. But since it's not the case that the state of things here has become very balanced, and we wonder if it ever will be on a place like the Bhur Loka or physical universe, and that it's a challenge for us to come here, and as a diamond is formed by these opposing forces on it all the time, treasure of the oneness, that like sand becomes a diamond before the wind, as the song sings, then that oneness needs to be pronounced. And that's why we meet with one another and speak on these matters very frankly and straightforward, because you don't walk down the street and see someone and turn and start talking about Brahman. Very seldom that will happen. even among practitioners, because there's this world around you and these activities to undergo and tasks to undertake. So it's wonderful that we can meet as a Sangha, a group of beings who have, at least inwardly, determined and resolved that this one Brahman is the most important facet of existence. In fact, everything else is a facet after it, and it's the one principle, the unchanging principle, they call it. The only thing that doesn't go through transmissions and transitions, I mean, and transformations, they call that aparinama. So we keep our mind on the changeless and let all the other things around us move as they will, according to their own dictates and their own karmas. So that's a wonderful place to find yourself in, a detached witness consciousness. In Sanskrit, sakshi bhutam, witnessing all the changing phenomena around you, but knowing yourself to be the foundation, this unchanging foundation of all that. A difficult thing to manage, especially out in the world. And so satsang becomes one of the ways in which a group of beings who are still working in the world, and work goes on even after retirement, it seems, a lot of things to do with your time, and how to do it and how to make the most of it, how to make the most of our time is always a point of interest on the forefront of the mind. But retiring into this deep silence that we partake of and have the great boon of knowing about is a great advantage for souls, individualized souls called jivas, who really are Shiva. My teacher used to say that. The jiva is Shiva. The jivatman is the Paramatman. It's just acting differently than itself when it comes into a form and forgets itself. So half the battle of this life, and it's aided by things like satsang and the discussion of the Dharma we'll have a couple hours from now, called God blogs or Brahman bites, is to reveal the nature of the self, which is so indivisible that it becomes invisible. It's the name of one of the God blogs this week, based on Sri Ramakrishna's saying is that sugar mixed with water disappears. So just like that, Atman mixed with the world disappears. It's the sweetness in everything. It gives everything its benefits and its power, not only just to move and act, but to still itself too. A snake sometimes wriggles, sometimes it sits still. So that Brahman and Shakti is one way of putting it. But there has to be a determination of the mind to want to live in a state of steadiness and balance called yoga. And then the willpower, after it determines with its intelligence that that's the only existence and it resolves around that matter, then the willpower comes forward. It's the second thing that happens. The first thing is just this determination by the intelligence, which is the first compound of consciousness, your intelligence. And then you determine rightly, and then you act with the willpower inside of you. So it's a wonderful package to have here on hand on earth as we sojourn in this dream I was just talking about, a mass collective mental dream that everyone's undergoing together. And it happens on the individual levels and then on the collective level. And then we meditate on beyond those two sometimes and get to the cosmic level. Cosmic there in India means the great or the Mahat, all that is all encompassing. the body, the very body of the Lord, which is Agnir Murda Chakshushi Chandra Suryao Vishaha Shrotrivag Vivitra Shavedaha Vayu Prana Hridaya Vishvamasha. The wind is its breath, Vayu, and universe is its heart. Hridaya Vishvamasha. Padbayam Prithivi, the earth is its Padbayam, is its feet. From its feet, the earth has originated, the verdant earth. So slokas like that, memorized, recited, talked about, shared, are a surefire way of getting us in contact with our true self. That maybe activity outward makes us doubt sometimes because of its varying degrees of success and failure and how we react to those things. And the balance to achieve, again, very difficult, but most desirable and most efficacious to us as living beings. To get off balance even for a few seconds is like torturing the Atman to the realized soul. Why would one want to do that? Why would one allow it? And when it comes to be in such an exacerbated form, like confusion and suffering and caused by ignorance, then it's just not acceptable for them. It's not something that you want to put yourself through. And you have not only the ability, but the right to be in full possession of and control of all your spiritual abilities, even in the harshest of conditions, which is what this is all around you, in case you haven't noticed. John Dobson, one of our friends in Vedanta, who was a Swami down in San Francisco a while, and then in a sidewalk astronomer, help you build telescopes and look at the sky, stars. Beyond retreats, and he'd show up. He used to say that, in case you haven't noticed. So all those things that we haven't noticed are the things that are hidden, like sweetness in water, sugar that dissolves into water. The Atman gets mixed with the world. The Atman's the sugar, the glass of water is the world, and then it disappears and nobody notices it, even though they're still attracted to all the sweetness of various objects and the pleasures and possessions and so forth. But they'll call the Atman by different names, Gaudapada says, at that point, depending on how their perspective is. They'll call it by that perspective. But the seer, you might say, is a being who specializes then on just that Atman. Where is that Atman that's invisible? How can I draw it out? How can I focus on it? And how can I make that the main objective of my life in the body? With all its temporariness, transitoriness, and change going on, situate myself there. Like Sri Ramakrishna used to say, if a child swings around on a pole, has a lot of fun, but loses its grip and falls and hurts itself. So that's what people are doing with this pole of the Atman or Brahman, Atma Brahma. Is they must develop a strong grip to always keep it first and foremost while they're, as it were, whirling around, which is actually a very fitting way of saying it, isn't it? Whirling around in the world with all these activities, nobody knowing what's coming next with all the randomness of the collective karma out there. And if the media has done us any favors, it's those of us who would rather witness conflagration and problem and war and all that, it's been just to make us more aware as spiritual aspirants that that's the way things are externally. That's an advantage they've given us, along with all the, of course, obvious disadvantages. So perhaps this usual opening preamble that I like to give to warm us up to the subject has perked something in your mind that you want to share here at Satsang. who wants to jump in?
Namaste, revered teacher. I'll just maybe make it really simplified, but my mind has been all over why I'm thinking about this or what it can mean to my understanding. But in the prayer Om Asatoma, we talk about lead us from fear of death to eternal life. But some of the wording is not eternal life, but I can't think of the word I want to say. Annapurna, we had talked about this. Instead of saying eternal life, what do people sometimes say in that prayer? Lead us
from the fear of death to immortality.
Immortality, thank you. That's so I understand that to mean more like immortality would be like as if we had the body, continued the body. So I'm not inclined to use that word either. But one thing I was thinking about, I don't know how it led me to that, but Pralaya, what happens to consciousness in Pralaya? Like I know there are seeds, but I can't really fathom that consciousness wouldn't be there for so long, like it would be asleep. Is it Brahman that sleeps? And what does that mean? So if you could explain a little bit more about Pralaya and about eternal life, like what does eternal life mean? Thank you.
Yeah. That shloka, actually, we've heard that Swami Vivekananda came, and the people who had heard a little bit about Sanskrit and studied it before he arrived on the scene were kind of giving that Om Sato Ma Sadgamaya shloka a rather strange English translation. So, and they were also misinterpreting the word Maya and so forth. So I think it was lead us from ignorance to wisdom, or from darkness to light. Lead us from ignorance to higher truth. But he got in there and changed it to lead us from lower truth to higher truth, because there was always an admixture of truth in everything, as we were just saying about the Atman. It's there in everything, though invisible. So he wanted people to think about it in a higher and better way, rather than just to give ignorance, its outright ignorance, which really doesn't exist, give it a hand, an advantage over everyone and everything, because that's bound to happen to people when they have insight, realization. They will look through the world and see it as a kind of play or a dream or even an illusion. So the good part about these souls coming and shining the light upon words and slokas and scriptures is a great benefit. And it's been a great benefit to intellectuals like Westerners, that they go more by the intellect than by the heart. And that's definitely true of America. And they're attracted to things that are of a nature of knowledge, but they haven't made a clear distinction between apara and para yet. The supreme knowledge, and then the relative knowledge. The apara vidya is what they're going after and what they're basing their studies upon, and trying to extract something of a deeper nature out of it. But they need to shift their gaze inward. Ramakrishna used to say that. Yeah. The eyes are there in center of the forehead, but their gaze is always looking down and out. So opening this third eye, looking inward, is what needs to happen. It's a difference between. Then it becomes a difference between Vishnu yoga and Shiva yoga. And Vishnu yoga is that you're looking inward, but you're keeping your gaze fixed partially outward. But with Shiva yoga, you're just completely destroying the outworld and looking only inward to the source. So it depends on what level of division of yoga you happen to be participating in or practicing, or abiding in, but nevertheless, that first distinction has to be made, that you're going to have to separate the wheat from the chaff, look inward and so forth. So anyway, lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, God said, and from the illusion of death to eternal life is how we do the English of that now in a more enlightened way since Swamiji was here, so that we don't fall victim to the negative side of things as ever having any real existence at all. I think that's the point. It's not that you want to be naive and try and hide from things that are negative. Father of Yoga wants you to face them off and overcome them and use everything here in the external world to master it. And so fear is going to be one of those things which you're going to have to master. That's why you meditate on air, earth, fire, water, and ether, and connect them to tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, and smelling. I mean, you just go through the cosmic principles and connect them, because they've lost their connection in people's minds. And you don't just study them from the standpoint of how can they benefit me materially. You study them and connect them so that you know the source of origins of things, where things came from. And then if they get out of hand, you'll know how to turn them off by going back to the source of origin and just switching off the light switch, as we used to say. Meditation is a kind of just going inside and finding that switch that runs your thoughts and just flicking it. And so all of a sudden, you're just in a perfectly peaceful state, and you've done it all yourself. And pretty soon you know where that switch is, and you can turn it off and on at will. You learn how to attach and detach at will, not just detach, which is one of the early things you have to do because you got attached. If you never had been attached in the first place, then detachment wouldn't get the accent. Or an individual who's naturally detached or renounced, like we saw Swami Vivekananda coming to Sri Ramakrishna, then what do you say to a person like that? You don't take them through the 12 levels of detachment and, drag them through that when they don't even have the problem in them in the first place. So it all depends on a determination of a person's stature or status at any given time in their life. And since forgetfulness is a great problem, then we go at all of this dharma and this seeming ignorance that's in us from the standpoint of let's just wake up and remember the truth, not have to go searching for it and create it anew. Darkness came and we wait for the sun, or electricity went out and we go looking for some candles. So it's a matter then again of self-will and using that to your advantage in any given situation. If your swift and quick recourse to challenges and trials is the Atman, then there's a split second where you face the possibility of being imbalanced, and that will stand you in very good stead right up to the moment when you're going to die. Krishna says that in the Gita. May everyone who, whenever the time comes, or whatever the case may be, in whatever state their karmas are, when they become aware that they're about to pass from the body, let them think these 6 things, he says in the Gita. And then he lists them out. So you might want to practice every day as a rehearsal for death. Every meditation is that too. And that will reinforce this fact of existence that I'm not the body. Whereas studying everything from a consciousness that's trapped, bottled up in a body, studying matter, because mind is also a kind of matter. It's a matter manufacturing machine. So then you're going to be at a great disadvantage if you just leave it in the hands of mental projection. nobody becomes a yogi, Arjuna, without mastering sankalpa and vikalpa. That's mental projections in time, basically, is what those words mean. So you're in time, the river's flowing, and you don't know how to get out of it and stand back from it, which you're learning by meditation. And you're also flowing in it with all the waves and currents and eddies that go down a river. The Upanishads talk about Brahman as a river of manifestation. And of course, that's the Saguna Brahman aspect, the personal God. That Brahman with qualities. And so if you come to a place of name and form and time and space, and there's cause and effect going on, then you're pretty certain that you've pegged Maya. And now you know what to stand back from and witness, and practice your witness conscious, cutting your teeth spiritually, as an infant spiritually, or as a spiritual infant. You know where to begin and how to accomplish the highest of all attainments. And then tell me your question again.
I just was thinking, what happens to consciousness when Pralaya takes place? So in a way, I have been, all the lessons that I've been taking from you and the Swamiji in Providence, every time always talks about death. So I've been trying to expand my consciousness the best I can to understand what happens to us, not just at the time of death, but if we merge with Brahman, or what happens to the consciousness when Pralaya takes place. It doesn't seem right that consciousness would go to sleep. That's kind of what.
Yeah, that was the main point that I was talking around. But first of all, if you're a dedicated Advaitist, no matter to what extent you have realized that very inscrutable philosophy, very, very subtle, and like, again, sugar mixed with water, it's going to be very hard to see too, but it gives you that philosophical sweetness that you're after. So if you're going to be doing that, first thing you'd say was, well, consciousness is beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. I mean, that's Om. That's what Om means, A-U-M, to the Advaitists. And so since it's beyond those three things, then it would be beyond action in waking, it'd be beyond dream and dream sleep, in dream state, and it'd be beyond sleep and deep sleep. Like Swamiji saying, the Atman Brahman never dreams. To think such thing would be ridiculous. It's the ever awake state. The beings who realize it are living in yogic insomnia. Our founder, like Sixin used to say. And my teacher used to recite that. A man has come to me from a land that never sleeps. Now all my dreams have been turned into radiant meditations. Beautiful Ram Prasad song that he translated into English. So I learned this all-embracing mother way from an adept who lives in a land where the sun of mother wisdom never rises and never sets. So it's just like daytime all the time, all sunlight all the time. This land of radiant awareness. And even beyond beautiful, inspiring words like that, this is a state of reality. It's the state of things as they are. So if you can raise your mind up and out of fear of death and so forth, and realize by these teachings, whether they be in songs or scriptures or from the lips of an illumined preceptor, then you too never sleep. And that's the one way to prove that Brahman never sleeps. So what about long periods of time then? Pralaya you're talking about, and Maha Pralaya, there's even such a word. Pralaya would be after a set of yugas goes by, like maybe 4. Everything will be drawn back by Shiva, metaphorically speaking, or anthropomorphically speaking, drawn back, and be in abeyance. It's the best English word they found to use for that. It's been held in abeyance. There's the seeds for everything. But consciousness doesn't have any seeds when you're talking about. I mean, it doesn't need to be born, and it doesn't die. So there's nothing to go back to for it. It's just the very nature of existence, Sat Chidananda. And so you're taking the movement away from it, you're taking the transformations away from it, as should be, and you're seeing it in the state that it is naturally. Eternal existence that you were just saying. Lead us from the illusion of death to eternal life or eternal existence. That's how Jesus liked to talk about it too, as eternal life. And so he was having a vision of that all the time. And you can readily understand Jesus by seeing somebody like Vivekananda come to your country, or even reading about such a great soul as Sri Ramakrishna and everything that went on in his Leela in a very short time. Or coming upon a non-dualist like Ramana Maharshi and beings like that. They just really enforce that divine intuition and feeling that you have in your heart all the time, but you never are around people who are sharing that same attraction that you are. They're always attracted to things passing, ephemeral, external, and fraught with fear of death, for instance. But lead us beyond the illusion of death. The illusion of death, don't forget that word. Not just lead us beyond death, because death doesn't exist. So if you didn't put the illusion of death in there, people would be all of a sudden slightly skewed in their thinking about it, as far as non-dual truth goes anyway, and those who have realized it. So Pralaya will roll along and come after every 4 yugas or so. Satya, Treta, Dvapara, Kali. We're supposed to be in the Kali Yuga right now. Not that it's so easy to tell. I mean, as far as passage of yugas goes, it's easy to tell by what's going on externally. But then there's a Mahapralaya that happens, long period of well, again, you have to be careful with words. It's not nothingness, because there's always something there. That would be the seeds of things. So everything returns to its seed, but the seeds are tended by someone. A garden with seeds has to be tended by someone. And that great soul was the Mahat. With everything got projected out of the great mind when the first yuga happened. Divine Mother came to Lord Brahma. Again, if you want to put it symbolically in stories, Brahma is sitting in meditation. Out of the navel of Vishnu comes a lotus. It unfolds. There's Brahma. Lord Brahma has been sitting there for a long time meditating. He opens his eyes and sees and looks around, and Divine Mother appears to him and says, here's the bijams. These seed words I give to you. Now I want you to start the next set of cycles of time in motion, so that all the beings can come and enjoy themselves therein. This would have different connotations depending if you're looking upon it tantrically, or if you're looking at it early Vedas, or if you're looking at it Upanishads, or if you're looking at it later Advaita, like Shankara. This would give you different perspectives of what this means. Somebody might say, oh, the sport and consciousness, that sounds good. And another one might say, why would Brahman want a sport? It's got everything inside itself. So there's these things that you have to tackle in your mind about perspectives, and hopefully be able to hold them all. Sri Ramakrishna said it's very difficult to hold more than one ideal. And for the most part, most people shouldn't. They should stick to one ideal. But he said it is possible to hold more than one ideal. For instance, God is with form and beyond form. That's not that difficult a concept to hold, but people are having a horrible amount of trouble with that. Philosophers are, and the religions are. So it's obvious that some greater intelligence has to be admitted into the arena of our mind. And time would figure into this. Oh, well, when Pralaya comes, consciousness doesn't sleep because it never had to awaken. Everything happened on or in it or came from it and went back to it, and consciousness just stayed the same. And that's a rule of thumb truth in Advaita Vedanta. So you don't even really have to ask the question anymore, where did things come from? Or, I mean, even who am I becomes a little bit pedantic and plodding a question at that point. Of course, you're Brahman. Didn't you hear what they told you? Wake up and be that. And then see everything as an expression of that. And live a life which is beneficial to yourselves and to all other beings. So every time a cycle of time begins again with the new yuga, then everything is. I just thought of this. It's a good way of saying it. Everything is quickly going to seed. It all came out of seeds, but it's going to go back to seeds in the end too. It retreats back into these seeds. But remember, consciousness is observing this process of coming and going. That's why Vivekananda said, coming and going is all nonsense. Where's the time which the soul will come when all of time is in the soul? And where's the place that the soul will go to when all of space is in the soul? I mean, there's a great thinker who takes things that people are pondering about for hundreds and thousands of years and just puts it in 2 sentences and you're free. Really. If you haven't started thinking of yourself as always free, never bound, then you better start. Because even if problems persist after you think that, they're going to go away a lot quicker if you just hold that perspective. The longer you hold it, the better for you. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise, that you're a sinner or other nonsense, that consciousness sleeps or something and wakes up. Whoever told Brahman what to do or how it is, you walk up to Brahman and say, I know you. How dare you wake and sleep? How dare you project universes? And Brahman will just point to the Mahat, say, I don't do that. He does it. She does it. Go to them if you want answers. But when you ponder Brahman, you ponder it from the ever-free, never bound state of your own consciousness. I am that would be the simplest way of putting it. And all of time is in it. So we used to say that, you have not come out of nature. And how long have people been taught that and thought that? Someone finally came along and said, you haven't come out of nature. Nature's come out of you. What is this called? It's definitely a change of consciousness in your mind. It's a turn of phrase, right? It's a turn of phrase at the highest level. You have not come out of nature. Nature has come out of you. Go down the street, just a few blocks, walk into a classroom. You'll see what they're teaching. In every school, everywhere now, in this Kali Yuga. Nobody says anything like that. Parents don't tell you that. Everyone believes in evolution. That's the first thing you part from. People who believe in evolution, I'm sorry, I part company with you now. I learned something higher from this guru. My blessed guru taught me different. Now I'm thinking on that. I'm thinking that way. And everything's going to change now in the most beneficial way because I am thinking that way. This is my opportunity to live in yogic insomnia and to slough off all these superstitions of the past. And the ones that come in the form of religion too are necessary to just dispatch with. So that's irreligion and its aims, where it goes. True religion will always take you towards freedom. Beyond salvation, to dependence on the only existence, which is yourself. So even your one question alone, Akshaya, is good for a whole hour satsang. That would be good for us just to make a few rules, and they've done it before. Make a few rules and just say, keep your mind on those higher rules. It's changeless. I mean, if you have to, you know, it doesn't wake and sleep, it doesn't dream, so forth and so on. All that is in relativity. Or if you want to look at it the other way, we've done that too. I've got in footfalls, you can look at the 16 evolutes of Maya. Look at it the way it isn't. Because Maya is so devious and is as hidden as Brahman and Atman is, isn't it? And Divine Mother, all the good things are hidden, but so are some of these really insidious things. Although Maya isn't all negative, but basically, if you looked at the 16 evolutes of Maya, you'd be turning around and talk about a turn of phrase. Now you have a turn of vision, and you're looking at all these things that have been foisted upon people, and you know how Maya works. Always study it from a distance. You know, Krishna said, never up close. And if you're in it, forget it, because that's what's happened. They have forgotten it. They don't have a word for it. Except pain or suffering or confusion. They have a word for what it does to you, but don't have a word for it itself. Only India has that. That's why we call Maya the queen of all four-letter words, pun intended. I mean, there's some really bad four-letter words out there, you know what I mean? How about golf? Because the American Indians saw that going on, you see. Saw a man walking through woods with a stick hitting a ball, and every time he hit it, he said, damn, or something worse. And so they thought the game was called damn. Let's go play damn. Let's go play shit. But Maya covers it all, trumps them all. So trump is a five-letter word. So that's one way of bringing Maya up short, is just by looking at it. It's sort of like a bully in the schoolyard. You finally face it off and look at it and see the way it really is. And then it retreats. And in its place, you see all this beauty and all this light that always was and always is. Who else has something to add in the remaining 15 minutes or so? Yes, time passes by fast when you're speaking of higher things. Yes, Isha, do you have something? Or were you just stretching?
Namaste, Babaji. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I was actually reading for my parents from the Bhagavad Gita earlier today, and chapters, and I think we're on the second chapter now. Bava's version, and and there's this in the first first two chapters, it's basically about the situation which Arjuna is finding himself to be in. He is dejected and needs that Atma Bodha, the self-knowledge, is strength. It is the embodiment of strength that is, and all good things in the world come out from this strength that is the knowledge of the self. So yeah, I think it's a wonderful thing to maybe think about, and if you could expand on this concept on this concept of true strength, that is the true self-knowledge, that'd be highly appreciated if you could maybe share a few points with me and the rest of the Sangha.
Yes, certainly. You were dropping out there because the Wi-Fi signal, you're in Iceland, I'm over here in Hawaii, but I was imagining, I was hearing and filling in the gaps, and I got most of what you said, particularly toward the end.
Okay.
This is called Mahavirya, is named for Hanuman, because he had the great strength to jump the ocean and so forth. So this strength is talked about in the Bhagavad Gita in that way. And of course, Vivekananda has come forward in recent times and said the only sin is weakness. So he wants all beings to be physically strong and mentally strong, with their prana alive and flowing, and their minds contemplating the higher truth, just as a matter of course, return to a natural matter of course so that when we wake up in the morning and go to sleep at night, the whole period of our waking state and our dreams thereby have been experienced in the Brahman state. Those who are fitted for the Brahman state is one of the teachings Sri Krishna talks about in the Gita in that regard. And it has a list of things of those who are fitted for the Brahman state. And so there's certain criterion that you'll have to follow and master in order to be qualified for that, and then adhere to it and not be swayed by it all. So yes, all weakness is the greatest sin, Vivekananda used to say. So that's evinced very nicely in the Bhagavad Gita. The chapters you're talking about are Vishada, the yoga of depression is, I think, the first. Vishada yoga is the first chapter, and then it's sort of symbolic and interesting to note that it goes right to Samkhya yoga. So after Sri Krishna hears the complaint of Arjuna in this state of weakness he's fallen into, which is very unbecoming for a warrior of his stature in the first place, but not hard to understand, considering Arjuna's predicament. But the Lord then guides Arjuna out of that Arjuna Vishada yoga, out of his Arjuna's depression. And how does he do it? Immediately going to the Samkhya yoga. So he starts telling about the varieties of things. Samkhya actually means variety. And that's how you get any mind out of depression. Oh, look at this. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at this. See this? You just kind of use the Maya to distract them away from the Maya and get your mind thinking and active again. It's called getting out of tamas and getting into rajas. And pretty soon, if you can master the gunas, even though the gunas still come over masters, like the dark night of the soul for Jesus and so forth. I mean, that was a great big dark cloud of tamas. They don't succumb to them because they're facile and they've mastered them in meditation, and they know that they're changing and passing all the time, like the world bewitching Maya is. So they can float atop them, like butter floating on top of the milk that's been churned. And in that way, then the chapters proceed from Samkhya, and then pretty soon they get on to Karma Yoga right away. Then pretty soon to how to renounce how to renounce karma sannyasa, and then pure sannyasa after that. The names of the chapters of the Gita themselves are telling a great tale, a great story about how to give people back their strength. You just lead them back to a rational way of thinking again. And pretty soon, even a battlefield standing in front of you is, that's nothing. I mean, you're standing there with Krishna and everything's horrible. He starts talking, and some time passes, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the Gita, you hear Arjuna says, "Oh, my depression's already gone here. Thanks. I can go to battle again." So it just takes a little bit of time with holy company like that, and all of a sudden you're thinking differently. And pretty soon you can do that for yourself in bad situations. You should be able to do that for yourself by having experienced examples of that mastery. Like our founder, Lex Hickson, was the most positive person we ever met. I mean, you never saw him even close to depression or saying never was said a discouraging word. Isn't that the song, you see? So just always in this positive state of mind, and it was that way all the time we saw him. We didn't see him otherwise. Even in the end, when he had cancer, and I met with him and so forth, he was that way, and telling me what to do in the future with SRV and things like that. So if you look at the march of events in your lifetime, and in the lifetime that you're living in with humanity around the globe and so forth, and you see it's all fraught with difficulties, and you kind of say, well, that's the way it's always been, and it's the way it'll always be. And then you give up this idea of utopian society, which started out back with Rome and Greece, and that we borrowed in the West. And now that even our architecture has pillars, and we've been influenced by the wrong side of the world. We should have been influenced by India and the better aspects of China and like Tibet was. And then we wouldn't have had this march and glut for power and domination, which is an occult power. It's an Astabala Siddha domination and power. So it's not something that a peace-loving country whose philosophy is based on ahimsa, non-violence, is going to go towards at all. They're going to actually go the opposite direction and fend it off for as long as they can. Then that's where you figure in Pralaya, and what yuga you're in, and step back and take a greater look at things, because when you do step back, there's someone doing the stepping, and there's something doing the looking, the onlooker, the witness. And when you find that, everything else seems trivial. It doesn't, because that's indestructible. You're talking about Akanda Satchidananda. It's not subject to decay and change and violence and destruction. And as soon as you find it, you feel so much better about yourself and about everything. And that's where fearlessness comes from. And then your mind won't be susceptible to things like depression anymore. And also to boredom. You find Vedanta and yoga, if you've really found them, then boredom should be a thing of the past. You can't wait to see what happens next, or to think about it and to put it in its right category, Samkhya-wise. So Sankhya very much, Lord Kapila, for coming up with that way of thinking, so that we could see ourselves as not only the witness of all that, but as the producer of it. Via Sankalpa. And Sri Krishna gives Arjuna the teaching of Sankalpa very early on. Can't become a yogi until you get over this, this projection in front of you called a war, until you transcend this, You can't be a yogi like he is. So there could be a lot more said about such things. And that's why we read the Gita. And yes, you wrote me and said you were reading it to your parents for the first time, even though they've been on a spiritual path part of their life. They've never read the Gita. So it's good that their son comes along, or their sons. And even though you can't tell which one's reading to you from time to time, is that you, Peter? Or is that you, Gudmundur? Who's reading today? The important point is basically that you're getting the teachings read to you of this very high ilk and standard of Atma Gyan, and that's what needs to be, as I chanted out at the beginning of satsang, needs to be heard, and then needs to be meditated upon with teachings, and then needs to be meditated upon directly. So that's what we do as we meet, and I'll hopefully see some of you for God Blogs in another hour or so. So may peace come unto all. May wisdom dawn upon all. May all see the face of truth and be fortified by the armor of love. Oh, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Ni Om Tat Sat.